Rarely do things come out and overtake entire sections of the world, but Pokemon was one of those things. It was a trend, a show, a collectibles, a game. It was everything all at once, and it was a cornerstone staple for the 90s to 2000s children to adults alike. And in 28 years, nothing has come along to actually challenge its role as the true master of monsters and the idea of the grand journey for a monster trainer, monster collector of any sort. Many things has tried, many things have failed. Everything from Digimon to Dragon Drive, Monster Rancher, and even Bakugan. And many games, even things like Monster Hunter, have attempted to capitalize on this attempted genre, but none of them have ever reached the level of fame that Pokemon is known for. That was until January 19th of 2024, when a small company released a game that never was expected to have any sort of success to the level that it saw already. And that game is called Palworld. Palworld is a game that is a combination of multiple things that we as communities have always asked for in game titles, especially in the idea of monster collection and the Pokemon style theme. The overarching dream of being someone who leaves their home to collect monsters, train them, fight them, and to become the best in the world at it. And Palworld has taken that idea and built it on top of a survival style genre. Games like Ark and 7 Days to Die, and now Palworld has taken the good parts of that and built it over the feel of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Many years ago, when Skyrim was massive and it was taking over the world, there was talks of the idea of bringing a Pokemon-style open world game to it, and there was even mods made for Skyrim that allowed that to exist. And quickly, Nintendo shut that down. And that is very, very standard of how Nintendo approaches these things, despite the fact of a dramatic call for these items. Well, Palworld has come through and shown exactly what Nintendo was missing out on inside of their own community, as this game has reached over 1.8 million concurrent players, and that makes it the second largest not free-to-play Steam game to ever exist, falling right behind PUBG at 3 million concurrent, and being only the 6th game ever to reach over 1 million concurrent players on Steam, the largest gaming platform on PC. But this isn't just pure luck. It is because Palworld is already a better Pokemon game than Pokemon ever has been. And it is also appealing to the larger aged group of Pokemon players from the 90s to 2000s that are currently playing games. It reaches out to the adult, to the child, to the every player that has ever played Pokemon games and wish there was a little bit more to it. This is a slightly more gritty, slightly more mature, and excessively more open-worlded style gameplay. This game allows you to go out and actually attempt to survive in the world, whereas Pokemon games in their own rights are only ever a small challenge in attempts to get you to the more competitive side of Pokemon at the end, which is where you essentially only battle your friends. And if you are not an actual competitive Pokemon player, the majority of the time that just includes beating up on usually cousins or brothers and sisters that are significantly less experienced with the titles. Pokemon games are notoriously simple. It's a game of rock, paper, scissors where types matter more than levels the majority of the game. And the game is notorious for also holding your hand most of the way through it, providing you with just what you need to be able to complete that. Of course, that's not completely true of the first gen, but has significantly fallen off in difficulty over the years. I know I personally haven't lost a trainer battle since 1997 after losing to Whitney's Miltank and wanting to break my Game Boy. But most players who have spent any amount of time in Pokemon are very familiar with the way that the game runs, and it is almost impossible, if you know what's going on, to really lose any of the base core game battles, and so most of the time players are left to just wander through the title and try to find what they can find. Palworld takes the actual survival idea of Pokemon that is sold to us on the show, where things like Ash attempts to survive a giant horde of Sparrow in the first episode. That sense of danger never exists inside the standard Pokemon titles. But the world sells us that there's this impending doom of walking out into a world where the lizards around you actually breathe fire. Well, that is not true for the Pokemon titles. You are rarely ever actually in trouble while playing Pokemon. But in every moment of Palworld, there is an impending doom of actually running into a fire-breathing dragon thing that will actually kill you. So in many ways, Palworld has actually perfectly captured the fear and the idea of walking into a world where these kind of monsters actually exist and you must cohabitate with them. Inside of Pokemon, there's always food, but there's never anything that dies. Every fight, the Pokemon is knocked out, and nothing poor ever really happens. They do speak on the idea that Pokemon can pass away, but nothing is ever really shown about the idea, as it is a kid's show, and I can understand that. But as the player base matures, and they're looking for something a little bit more true to form, true to life, Palworld also features that fear, where you can actually consider the fact that you are eating these monsters. Whether or not that's considered a positive or negative trait, it definitely does fall under the idea of the survival, something that they're selling you in Pokemon as well, but never really talk about it. It's a hush-hush subject. But in Palworld, the subject is right out on the table. Anytime that you manage to knock out one of the monsters, if it's a consumable monster, it's going to drop food. And this is a survival game where your characters get hungry, so you will have to eat it. And that's one of those things that you have to consider when you look at the new and evolving and maturing player base, especially ones that are looking for the true idea of a survival game with these monsters, is food doesn't just show up, they're probably actually eating these things. And Pokemon, the show, they frequently eat all sorts of things. Even in the games, the new games, there are multiple food dishes like curries with sausages, and I don't think I've ever seen a regular animal inside of a Pokemon game. I only see Pokemon, and that curry sausage has to come from somewhere. And I'm gonna bet you it's Grumpig. Palworld also addresses some of the concerns from the Pokemon side of the world that we never really look on. There's an entire section of the Palworld people that believe that the Pals should never be captured and should be left alone. And in Pokemon, they're always like, yeah, these things are our toys now. We're going to use them forever. And in Palworld, there's an entire section that are like, yeah, that's really wrong. You're enslaving them. And that's a very delicate subject, but it's also very easy to actually accept that there should be these kinds of discourse in a world where all of these things exist. And then, of course, there is the syndicate inside of Palworld also that are attempting to use these monsters for the worst possible things ever. Consider them your Pokemon's Team Rocket. Except for instead of only trying to capture one Pikachu for 20 years, they're actually just trying to catch the most devastating things they can and utilize them on other people to take their stuff. It makes a lot more sense than chasing one Pikachu, even though that is a special Pikachu, for 20 years. But sure, both sides have logic, but one has been trying to stay to the same thing for 28 years, whereas the other has been out just for a few days and is already taking over the world. And that's primarily because Palworld is just better at being Pokemon than Pokemon is anymore. Pokemon has played it safe for far too long and refused to grow with its audience, hoping that new players will come in from nowhere and, of course, adopt what is already pre-existing, while also refusing to grow with the community that it has built over the 28 years. There is still plenty of us, myself included, that will continue to enjoy the Pokemon titles. But understanding that games like Palworld out there are attempting to actually grow the idea and expand upon it in a more adult and beautiful way, well, Palworld is just better at being Pokemon than Pokemon is now. And that's pretty rare when something comes out and actually improves on something rather than just being a worse carbon copy. Imagine Terminator 2. but that might be a conversation for another day.